Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do when Chevy John don't come for you? Tell me what you wanna do, what you gonna do. Yeah, bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? When you were 8 and you had bad traits, you go to school and learn the golden rule. So why are you acting like a bloody fool? If you get hot, then you must get cool. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? You chuck it on that one, you chuck it on this one.
Maybe you don't have to talk to me. Maybe you don't have to talk to the other candidates that ran under this, but it seems like you would want to. No one from the town, and none of you have ever approached me and said, hey, Will, how do you think this thing worked? You were on the inside of it. Do you think it worked? Where do you see the problems from the inside? I'd suggest before you move forward that you might want to survey us folks who did run and get their perspective, and I think it might be very illuminating. So anyway, thank you for taking my comments. Good luck.
Thanks, Will.
For you to suggest that the people who gave me $10 didn't participate in democracy the same way someone who gave me $250 is a little insulting.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Actually, I'm saying exactly the opposite. Now, Matt, I'm going to stop there because my point is actually the opposite of that. The $10 contribution now suddenly becomes really important.
Right. And secondly, what I have said all along is we have a cap on contributions in Chapel Hill of $250. We're not talking about large corporate contributions. The predicate here is that people buy access in Chapel Hill.
So PACs are viable, and you can receive money from PACs, whether you're a VOE or whether you're running on your own money. So that information is on the website at Orange County Elections. It's there. I also want to say that I don't think that the VOE program was ever compromised. I think that we were on the up and up. This is something that someone else did, and I'd like to just keep it that way. It had nothing to do with the candidate that was running. I'm very positive about this, and I move that we pass this.
Well, actually, just one correction. VOE candidates cannot take PAC money of any kind, but non-VOE candidates actually can take checks from PACs, and that's what you're referring to.
And that's what I'm referring to.
Is the receipt of checks to a campaign.
That's correct.
Not.
I would support a conversation about the process. I will not participate in a conversation about this specific case. And if, Ralph, you're going to slap me, but I've been a CEO in private industry for 25 years, and I can't find any evidence that management orchestrated any of this. And if you read the personnel files, which we were allowed to do legally privately, this case should have never gotten this far, and these people shouldn't have worked this long in this community, as far as I'm concerned. If I was CEO, I would have supported those decisions. So I'm not going to, this will be the last thing I ever say, the first thing I've said publicly and the last thing I'll say about this case. I believe the process may have some places it could be improved. I would agree with that. If that's a conversation, I'll support your motion. If it's about this case, I won't.
Yeah, Matt.
I think any organization can always improve its processes, and therefore self-reflection, external examination of processes is always a healthy thing. I also will support that. Absolutely do not support. Think it's inappropriate for the council to essentially second-guess a judgment which is not ours to make. So I don't know what the motion is that's on the table. But I know, hopefully, I'm clear as to what I will support and not support, as with Gene.
Well, the motion is not closed-minded as to where this is going to go. I want to have a conversation with my council colleagues about, and I will say, about this particular circumstance, these two employees' circumstances, and the process in which they found themselves. That's what I want us to have a conversation about. And that's what I am, when I say refer and receive and referring it, I am I'm supporting the referral to us to have that conversation.
I would like to say firmly that nothing that I heard makes me feel like our town manager orchestrated some system by which he wanted to strip away the rights of any of our employees. So the conversation that came to me was that these two gentlemen were fired because they were making grievances and because they were black. And what I heard was that there were reasons that they were fired, but they weren't those reasons. And I also heard that there was also some management issues that I might have wished that this could have been handled differently. But the entire conversation that has come to me for months has limited my ability to say anything in that direction because all I could speak about was the way it was framed, whether I felt like Roger Stansel had acted in some way so overtly that he deserved to be fired, that there was a system that we were trying to, in this town, stop unions from developing. Now, am I saying that our system for allowing unions to be created is perfect and that we can't make change? No. Am I saying that there does not exist racism in our system? I'm like, yeah, it exists in all systems. And it is our job to constantly work to not only find the sources of that racism, but work to pick them out. But coming with positions and giving people no space to negotiate or speak or collaborate is not a useful way to make that change. So if change is what you really want to make, then you come to those who want to make that change, who have proven that they want to make that change. And you don't demand something and tell them that is the only thing that you will take. That is not negotiation. That is not negotiation. That is you placing me in a position where you're telling me I either do what you say or I do nothing. And I'm saying I'm not doing nothing, but I'm not doing what you say.
I agree that Donna, you were very eloquent. I appreciate those remarks. I think that certainly nothing, I cannot imagine this circumstance rising to the level of a need to fire our town manager. I do think that, and I didn't go to the hearings, I was divided on whether I should go to the hearings or not. I appreciate your comments, Jim, and I think that we should engage in a dialogue about the process and what went wrong and the ways that we can do about it. If that's what your motion is, to have that discussion at some later time, then I can support it.
I just want to be personally clear that receive means what?
That means we've heard. I mean, for us to refer it, I think we need some specificity in the motion as to who we would refer it to. Our receive and refer motion would be to refer this then to our manager. Now, I mean, what I'm hearing from the petition here is, from the petitioners, is that they want us to hear something, and we are, it didn't seem. I supported the motion to receive because it didn't seem appropriate to then send it to staff for a response, but then we hear this and
that's that.
We'll take it, and then the council can do what they would like with that information.
So then, I want to be clear, to the extent any of my colleagues aren't, but and also to everyone else who's in the audience, that receiving it fundamentally means we've heard it. Since we are not receiving and referring, there is no expectation of any subsequent action.
Right, unless a council member were to receive this information and be inspired to cause an action to occur. So, I mean, we'd have to refer it to somebody if you wanted to refer, or
sure. No, I want to be clear, but also want everyone else to understand, because these things happen so quickly. Receive and refer, or receive. 9 times out of 10, if not more, we receive and refer. One time recently we received, and I guess we decided to refer, but there was debate.
Right.
In this case, what just kind of happened was we said we would receive, but not refer.
That's right.
And that therefore, what we're voting to do is to say effectively, this is in the
Thank you.
record. Thank you. No further action anticipated unless, as you said, a council member on further reflection chooses to pursue this further.
Well, I'd like to receive and refer the most recent Ms. Thompson's remarks to the council.
It's been moved and seconded. I don't know quite. Can we
Well, what exactly
explain a
are
little
we
further?
Well,
referring?
to me, that means that I want us to talk about this, find a time to talk about this as a council.
So, Jim, what out of her comments, what do you take her exact petition to be?
The wholeness of what took place. I sat through 5+ hours of the first appeals board meeting. I sat through all but the first hour of the second one. And I'm troubled by what I learned and what I heard. It is far from a perfect system. And I don't know right now what the answer is, but I'm not comfortable sitting here and with the results that as they stand today. And by receiving and referring this, I wanted to say what I just said to this council and hear what others had to say. And see where that leads us.
Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests, unquote. As a human rights city, I hope the town applies this principle to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to a current issue in town's Public Works Department and to the 2 workers recently separated from town of Chapel Hill employment.
Good evening. My name is Nathan at Mayo. I'm the municipal chair for the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE 150. On December 10th, 1948, following the end of World War II, the General Assembly of the United Nations passed a set of standards or human rights which all citizens of the world are entitled to. These are known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 23 of this Declaration of Human Rights gives workers the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Article 24 gives everyone the right to reasonable limitation of work hours. The town of Chapel Hill seemed to support these rights when it passed a resolution allowing for meet and confer between employees, organizations, and management, and another resolution supporting collective bargaining rights for public employees. In lieu of passage of a statewide collective bargaining law for public employees, meet and confer sessions in the town would allow for some input of workers and employees on health and safety issues, policy issues, and general work environment concerns. The council seemed to know and believe that frontline workers' input is invaluable to providing outstanding, proficient, and efficient programs and services to Chapel Hill citizens. There clearly is a disconnect between ideals of the town and council and the actions of town managers and department heads. Workers are clearly retaliated against when they raise health and safety concerns, workplace concerns, and use their right to file grievances to have those concerns addressed. This was seen in the suspension of transit worker and active UE 150 member Stan Norwood and the nearly 6-week suspension of Clyde Clark and Carrie Bigelow, also both active union members and shop stewards. Management has set aside $65,000 of taxpayers' money to pay a well-known union-busting firm, CAI, to provide an impartial investigation on this suspension of Clyde and Carrie. The company that teaches companies and towns or whoever wants to listen to it how to stay union-free, they are the ones who are given $65,000 to investigate this. We see management's hiring of CAI to be in direct contradiction to the town's ideals. The money could have gone to hiring needed workers or improving town services. We challenge the council to live up to its stated principles and invalidate any contract with this and similar companies, to publicly repudiate management for having a contract with a company such as this that clearly violates the town's support for collective bargaining and its history of working with unions. And lastly, to clearly state in policy the right of workers to have due process, to have representation in any meeting which could lead to discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Now,
my name is Miriam Thompson, a Chapel Hill resident and active community member, a union member and a representative tonight of the state AFL-CIO and its Triangle Labor Council. Last month, we joined with our social justice and civil rights allies to endorse a resolution we hoped would restore justice to the town of Chapel Hill's public workforce, and specifically a case of 2 workers now terminated. Others tonight will comment on a biased investigation by a well-known corporate operation the town hired at taxpayers' expense. I want to comment that the contract with Capital Associated Industries, CAI, representing the Employer Association of North Carolina, violates, among other things nationally, but violates the town's commitment to being a human rights city, its culture of ethical governance, its support for the right of public workers to collectively bargain, its widespread reputation for supporting a fairly treated and respected public workforce to assure efficiently and effectively run public services, which will be a challenge now more than ever. So our question tonight is how the town can repair a broken system in which the Bigelow-Clark case represents. We can start by rectifying an injustice levied against 2 workers who we believe were punished for trying to organize workers, for documenting a hostile work environment, a broken management system with no worker protections, a system in which favoritism abounds with little supervisory accountability, a system in which workers have to hire their own attorneys to get justice, a system in which workers are intimidated from filing grievances. The Bigelow-Clark case represents an example of denial of due process, but it is also a case in which the best models of labor management practices were ignored or rejected by supervisors either willfully or because of poor training or incompetence. The case against these 2 workers was built over months without their knowledge or the opportunity to address their accusers, or the opportunity to illuminate and respond to the charges and reconcile any conflicts with co-workers and community residents. Let's be reminded that one is a 13-year veteran and a minister, the other a native of the community and belongs to one of the town's most venerated families. In conclusion, we urge the council members to repair a broken system by restoring Kerry Bigelow and Clyde Clark to their positions, rescinding the CAI contract, reviewing grievances and EEOC cases filed over the last several years, speaking to worker delegations to elicit their evaluation of their working conditions and supervisory personnel and the town's management and HR staff, and considering assignment of an independent ombudsman to aid in this vital conversation. The North Carolina AFL-CIO community commits its resources and joins its social justice allies in pursuing just remedies to the challenges we have enumerated, and we count on support from the Chapel Hill Mayor and members of the Town Council. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Thompson. Laurel Ashton, Ngaza Laughinghouse, and John Robbins.
I'm here as a supporter of the Sanitation-2 and also as someone who opposes the continuous encroachment on historically African-American neighborhoods. And I want to begin by speaking about some of my experiences working with housekeepers at UNC. I first began working with UNC housekeepers about 2 years ago when I joined Student Action with Workers. While I've had many realizations during my experiences doing this work, I would say one of the most unsettling has been having to acknowledge the extreme hypocrisy between how the university I attend and spend a lot of money on every year presents itself and how the administrators of that university allow its workers to be treated. UNC's mission statement says that it has charted a bold course of leading change to improve society and to help solve the world's greatest problems. And yet, when I talk to housekeepers, it is clear to me that we have a lot of problems right here at home that the university is choosing to ignore. Whether we are talking about the sexual harassment that housekeepers face from management, especially the night shift Burmese workers, workers who have come here as refugees, or we're talking about the supervisors who yell at and threaten housekeepers on a daily basis. Housekeepers are both vilified and infantilized on my campus. On one hand, they are told that they can't be in areas where students congregate, such as student lounges and the pit, as if they are some danger to us. And on the other, they are told that they can't have access to computers because they might use it to watch porn, as if they're 13-year-old boys. And remember, the majority of housekeepers are women in their 40s and 50s. The favoritism that occurs in housekeeping is widespread and acts as a way to pit housekeepers against one another and helps keep those who are brave enough to speak out silent. You may be wondering why I'm talking about housekeepers during a public comment about the sanitation too. It is because I know that rehiring the sanitation too is not just about getting Clyde and Carrie their jobs back. It is about showing every public sector worker in Chapel Hill, including UNC housekeepers, that they don't have to be afraid to speak out for what is right and to stand against the mistreatment that they face daily. You may be wondering how these outrageous things happen while management and UNC administration do nothing about it. Housekeepers know that they can be fired for speaking out because it has happened before. In a state like North Carolina, where protections for workers are few and where you don't have collective bargaining, all we have is our will to struggle for what is right. If you all allow that will to be trampled on by union-busting investigation firms and retaliatory terminations, then Chapel Hill workers will never find justice. Mayor Kleinschmidt, I know that you have come out in support of collective bargaining, but if your words are only in support of workers' rights and your actions are not, then you're not truly helping the people of Chapel Hill. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to thanks for the time that they have given us, and I would like to bring to your attention the number of years as employee of town of Chapel Hill, myself, and Jerry Neville, over 30 years, to bring some kind of fair representation for town employees. We thought the day of dialogue was going to be that time of opportunity. The day of dialogue was an idea that I got from a film right here in the town council chamber called Class is Divided. Hoping that by showing this film on the day of dialogue, that this would bring some kind of communication between management and employees. But it did not do that. Organizations like the Black Workers Association have been fighting for years, since 1997. In 2004, we started working with UE 150 Union in Section 14-5 of the Town Code of Ordinance. Town recognized employees have the right to belong to a union or organize. Now, if you file a grievance, you don't know whether or not you're going to be retaliated against. A grievance is a way an employee can express his or herself with being retaliated against. And we have a mission statement that the town give out that talks about ethics and social equities. We are supposed to have an HR department that's supposed to be working with town employees, but they do the opposite. And they go out and hire a union busters like the CIA, consulting firm, informing on how to deal with employees and using taxpayers' money like $65,000 just for one project that we know of. These committees that we have, like the employee committee, employee forum, don't do anything for the employees. A lot of the people that on these committees represent only themselves. Carrie and Clyde and Stan are people that have been standing up for fairness, moral values in the workplace, and have been retaliated against and for standing up for this. Our mission statement that the town have talking about core values. I personally myself have been retaliated against and been dealing with discrimination at Public Works also. So these are the kind of issues that we are faced with at Public Works.
Mr. Neville.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the council for letting me speak here today. In my 20 years as being a town employee, I've worked in 5 different departments. I've seen favoritism when it comes to promotions, and it's done through reorganizing departments. Lots of times, most qualified person does not get the job or the pay. I've seen management create jobs for someone with no experience, and that person makes more money than someone with experience. We need fairness in our workplace, not favoritism. Today I'm here as a co-chair of the Labor Committee for the NAACP. I'm speaking on behalf of my friends Clyde Clark, whom like myself have lived and worked in and around Chapel Hill for the past 50 years. I'm also here to support Carrie Bigelow. I've heard that the serious incident charge have been filed against Clyde and Carrie, and they're on the verge of losing their jobs because of a citizen complaint. I believe that Clyde and Carrie, if they had not filed grievances, then these charges would have been handled in some kind of other way. I believe that Clyde and Carrie have been targeted because they've been speaking out about unfairness in the workplace. Thank you.
Be quick, but this
I want to
is
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Town Councilman, Council for indulging us. I will be brief. Simply, based on what we've been able to discern in investigating and looking into this issue, especially with the administrative leave placement for Mr. Bigelow and Mr. Clark, we're simply asking that the town consider their case specifically in the context of a larger issue, which seems to be patterns of unfair, inhumane, unjust treatment of our town workers. We here in Chapel Hill are better. We have a history that shows that we tend to end up on the right side. And so I'm hoping that that is the case here. These young men, they have families. They've got to get back to work. And unless there are some reasons that are beyond what has been presented so far, we're asking that you indeed do get them back to work. We believe that they were retaliated against and that their administrative leave placement was indeed unfair. And I'm just simply hoping that we continue the legacy that we have here in Chapel Hill in fighting for and representing just causes and doing things justly. And then the last thing I want to I just want to say is that for us, this is an issue. It's letting us know the direction that our town is heading. And we know that there is a growing faction here in Chapel Hill that's ultra-conservative, that really, to me, is out of sorts with the history of Chapel Hill that has placed it on the map as the southern part of heaven. And so I want us to consider the direction and the message that we're sending to the rest of the state as they look to us for leadership on what's just and what's right. Thank you.
So you use my time and whatever time.
Okay, well, hi, my name is Bree Bigelow. I'm the daughter of Carrie Bigelow, who is also known as being part of the Sanitation 2. I disagree with the town of Chapel Hill's decision to release my father and Clyde Clark from their responsibilities at the town of Chapel Hill. Because 1, my father has mouths to feed, mine being one of them. And 2, I see no harm done in standing up for what you believe has been a wrongdoing. The purpose of my father's harmless actions were to make a better life for my entire family, so why make it so difficult? And as my father previously said, get on the right side of history, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bigelow.
I'm Stephanie Gaskill. I'm a graduate student at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Sanitation 2. So I have a prepared statement. One of the most basic lessons I've learned as a historian is that the conditions in which we live are rarely the result of vague, inexplicable forces beyond our control. This lesson hit me hardest when I learned about how Detroit became the post-industrial wasteland it is today. As a kid growing up in Toledo, my parents always told me Detroit was a dangerous place. But it took a graduate seminar in American history to make me realize that this was not because the city was naturally a magnet for crime or because its citizens were inherently corrupt. Rather, deliberate decisions to deny African Americans in particular fair access to decent housing and jobs, along with the federal government's decision to allow corporations to flee the unionized working force of the North for the right to work South, made Detroit what it is. Wealthy whites could flee the dying city, leaving blacks behind with low-paying jobs, a fast-increasing need for services, and an ever-decreasing tax base. Racism and corporate greed at their best. Of course, racism has a different history here in the South, one that involves the all-too-familiar stories of slavery and Jim Crow. But in many ways, the story here in Chapel Hill is not fundamentally different than that of Detroit. As seen in the case of Mr. Clyde Clark and Reverend Carrie Bigelow, racist laws like North Carolina's Jim Crow-era 95-98 have resulted in the de facto criminalization of workers' inherent right to unionize and collectively bargain. This far from colorblind law created an environment in which these men could be fired because they complained about racist and unsafe working conditions and sought to unionize. Similarly, efforts to redevelop historically black neighborhoods in Chapel Hill are resulting in the systematic removal of the town's African American citizens. Granted, the situation is different than that in Detroit. Instead of allowing corporations to flee unionization, North Carolina legislators simply deny their workers the right to collectively bargain in the first place. And instead of abandoning its African American citizens, Chapel Hill is simply pushing them out to solve its race problem. But in the end, the results are the same. A segment of our population is unjustly denied fair access to decent jobs and housing. The good news about my history lesson is that it means that these problems are not beyond our control. These conditions have been created by human decision and can be fixed by human decision. You've already taken a step in the right direction by supporting the right to collectively bargain and to consider the Sanitation 2 case. I urge you to keep making right decisions by translating these words into action. It's your job to investigate racial discrimination in the workplace and the community and ensure that it is rectified. Rehire the Sanitation 2 and work to end housing discrimination. Uphold your duty as public servants and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Campbell, Reverend Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and the councilman, and the town staff and manager. I come tonight seeking justice. I come tonight demanding justice. The Word of God says to His people, those that are called by my name, if they will humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways, then I shall hear from heaven. Forgive them their sin, and I will heal the land. I come tonight seeking justice for Reverend Carrie Bigelow and Clyde Clark. The conversation is about justice, human rights, and doing the right thing. What is in your heart? I thought screws were dead, but we find out in the midst of the season where we should be giving thanks and celebrating the birth of our Savior, that we are doing ill things to people who have invested in the city of Chapel Hill, their time, their labor, and then we turn our back on them and fire them because the outcry of one citizen. When do we allow a citizen to make a judgment that the council of the town have to abide by without due process? These men were fired without due process. When are we going to do the right thing? I come tonight not only seeking justice, but I come tonight demanding justice for a town that prides itself in justice and civil rights. I don't need to remind you of the injustice that happened yesterday when a dear friend of mine that was killed in the 70s and the rule that took place in the courthouse caused the city of Chapel Hill to be firebombed. I need to remind you of injustice in the 30s when the town of Chapel Hill, along with UNC, approved to the chief of police to go out and buy a Gatling gun to keep those people in place. I don't need to remind you about a young man that did 3 tours of duty in Vietnam, and when he come home, his civil rights were violated and was called a menace to society. I stand before you tonight, that man. Neither am I a menace to society, but when I speak out against the injustice in this society, then we are reminded who are the menace to society. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. So motion to receive and refer Ms. Laws and Reverend Campbell's comments to the process. Barry Freeman and then Lydia Powers.
My name is Barry Freeman, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The 2 sanitation workers should not have been fired. No, hold it. Let's look at the facts. They had unresolved grievances about safety issues on the job. They moved to start a union. The 2 workers had an exchange with a resident over whether they were required to pick up trash in her yard. The resident complained about the workers' attitude. The town manager hired a company with a known record of anti-union activity to investigate the 2 workers. The report of the investigation blamed the workers for threatening residents. The town manager used the report as the basis for firing the 2. At the hearing before the appeal board, the town manager had 2 town employees, in addition to the anti-union investigator, speak against the men. He also arranged a phone connection with an unnamed woman who claimed to have been frightened by one of the workers. There was no opportunity to question the anonymous caller. It is clear that this hearing was orchestrated by the town manager to get rid of the 2 workers and possibly to end the threat of a union. Could the complaints of the residents have been handled in a manner short of firing? Of course, but that would have required the town manager with skill of negotiating and without bias against union organizing. Mr. Mayor and town council members, I suggest that the town manager is the problem and the 2 workers, not the 2 workers, and that council should think of looking for another town manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Sean Langberg, Scott Williams, and then Laurel Ashton. Mr. Langberg.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Sean Langberg. I'm a student at the university up the road as well. I'm here to talk about sanitation too as well. When I first found out about the sanitation case, it was in the newspaper on campus, and I just flipped to the next page, didn't really think much about it. But as I read more and more of the stories and I found out the real information versus what was reported and the lies that were expressed at these meetings, the case caught my attention more and more. The 2 men, as you can see by the turnout here, are more than just sanitation workers that picked up trash, and more than just a blip on Chapel Hill's radar, as I think you're finding out in the last couple of weeks. We all know they were fired for illegitimate and corrupt reasons, but I think some of the members of the council and town administrations are simply just unwilling to admit that. Due process was denied, and an effort was made to suppress unions and collective bargaining, which I also think that we all know here, but some of the town council is also unwilling to admit. I'll keep it brief, but I'm not a union organizer. I'm not a policy expert. I'm a freshman at Chapel Hill. But I do know when injustice has occurred, and in the Sanitation 2 case it clearly has, and it's fairly blatant to all of us in this room. So I urge you to restore justice to these men and give them the due process they deserve, we in this room deserve, and the town of Chapel Hill deserves. Thank you very much.
Mr. Langberg. Mr. Cohen, and then C.J. Stewart.
Thank you. I'm Michael Cohen. I'm on the board for Internationalist Books. Before I make my main point, last meeting, well, Jim Ward, your desire for truth last time was inspiring, and you've got a fan in me. That was brave. Thank you. A member of the board said last meeting that she did not believe that Roger Stansel was involved in a conspiracy to break UE 150. I'd like to say that I agree. Conspiracy is defined both in the dictionary and in a court of law as a secretive agreement between individuals, the key word being secretive. In a right-to-work state where we lack the right to collective bargaining, in North Carolina, one of the least union-friendly states in the USA, which is one of the least union-friendly countries in the first world, union busting is not a conspiracy. Hiring a firm which advertised on its website that it targets unions to investigate a way to fire that it targets unions to investigate a way to fire organizers of an emerging union is not a conspiracy. It is simply business as usual. With that said, I heard what the mayor said last meeting about civility, and while I found it unfortunate that you chose to compare peaceful protesters to a lone gunman in the Southwest before any disruption or jeering had occurred, I think I got what you were trying to say. Today I have also come with a blue pin that says civility. I like civility. I'm a fairly low-key individual. I think that most folks, given the choice, will choose the civil path. I think we all prefer doing things the easy way. I think as long as civility is seen as an effective way to pursue justice, people are inclined to take the path of least resistance. Situations like this always remind me of a quote by JFK, which is, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." Now, obviously, I'm not here to advocate revolution, violent or otherwise. But my main point to the board is that on the matter of civility, the ball is really in your court. If we feel that civility is taking us toward justice, that'll be wonderful. If it seems that your pleas for civility are actually just a ploy to get us to behave in a way that is easily ignored, I'd be very disappointed by that. Thank you.
Hello, I am Wes Hare, and my wife and I came here when Howard Lee was mayor, so that means I've been part of the problem here for over 40 years. And Jane happens to be in the Raging Grannies, so the fine and Raging Grannies are back in the back. About 3 or 4 months ago, when this whole thing surfaced, it just didn't seem right to me. And I've talked to a lot of people who I've come to know and respect in this town. I certainly wasn't on the street when whatever happened happened, but I think it's important for me to have some faith in the people that I respect and appreciate, and this is not right. Tom Monk has already said it, but I'm going to say it one more time. This does not pass the smell test. I do not understand why in the world the town had to hire what I have heard from the media and people that act like they know, a contracting firm that has a strong union busting reputation. So that makes it smell even worse.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. No one's taking anybody's comment as approving it either. Lydia Powers, Max Davis, and then Donald Quince. Ms. Powers?
Hello. I would like some of my fellow people from iBooks, if I'm from Internationalist Books and Community Center. If I'm talking too fast, if they just do this, give me a little reminder, slow down. I'm a real nervous speaker.
We have fast ears, though, Ms. Powers. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so wow, okay. Chapel Hill would like to present itself as a liberal and progressive haven, free of racism. But if you look at the numbers, they don't reflect this at all. The African American population has dropped from 52% in 1965 to 9.5 in 2010. So why are so many black people leaving town? Beneath the roofs of civility and plurality presented to us by the town council, a war has been waged against the black workers in our town. It's not just about housing getting a little too expensive or jobs disappearing. It's a direct and conscious effort to whiten Chapel Hill with massive luxury developments and proactive police harassment of black communities. I'm just going to give you one extreme example of this. In 1994, the police launched a raid in the North Side neighborhood, a historically black and working class area of Chapel Hill. I myself am working class and I live there now. This was called Operation Ready Rock, and it is one of the grossest misuses of police power in this country. The police received a blanketed warrant allowing them to search every person and vehicle on the 100 block of Graham Street. The warrant itself states, "We believe that there are no innocent people at this place, only drug sellers and drug buyers on the described premises." 45 heavily armed commandos from state and local law enforcement agencies sealed off all of Graham Street and made what the police described as a dynamic entrance into a pool hall by smashing in the front door and holding the occupants at gunpoint. There was an older gentleman in the pool hall at the time who had actually, unfortunately, from fear, had urinated on himself, and the police continued to scream at him. Anyways, sorry, this is a little upsetting. Okay. Whites were allowed to leave the area, and on the street, police selectively searched African Americans. Even though over 100 people were subjected to this, the police could only get 2 minor possession charges, one of marijuana and one of amphetamine. So clearly the drug dealing was simply an excuse. While this incident is one of more obvious use of police to enforce white supremacy and terrorize lower-income black populations, it is just one incident of the systematic harassment that has driven people from the last remaining affordable neighborhoods in Chapel Hill, where many of the town's public workers come from, Mr. Clyde Clark among many. At first, this seems crazy. What benefit would there be to drive out working-class black people from Chapel Hill? Oh yeah, Greenbridge. Greenbridge now looms over the street where Operation Ready Rock actually took place, literally in that area. Of course, so it's clear that the reason to drive out black workers is so that rich people could come in and take the land for themselves. Of course, alongside the attack on black workers through police harassment and gentrification lies the town government's active denial that any such racism could possibly occur, to the extent that when black people point out systematic racism in Chapel Hill and unsafe working conditions as Clyde and Reverend Carey have done, what's the town's officials' reaction? Is it to address their grievances? To create a committee to investigate racism? Fire the people responsible? No. It's to label Clyde and Carey as insubordinate and those who object as uncivil. I think what's going on here is clear. Harassment and firing of black workers is normal in Chapel Hill. Identifying and acknowledging racism is seen as an aberration, uncivil, and insubordinate. And it seems as though the town council wants to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers.
Okay, I'm going to try really hard to speak slow. I'm really shy. Okay. So good evening. I'm Lydia Powers. I'm the manager of Internationalist Books and Community Center. It's in town. It's been around since 1981. And I'm here with a few of our board members who I'll be speaking for as well. So I'm going to be brief because other people have been really articulate. It's great. So I'll just get to the point. It's really obvious to us that at Internationalist Books that Clyde Clark and Reverend Carey Bigelow were fired due to their speaking out and helping other workers to file grievances. Even though we just found out about this, it's very obvious. And we condemn this action clearly, and we see no appropriate response but to hire Clark and Bigelow back immediately, address racism in the public works, and to discipline their supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So, hi, I'm Lydia Powers. I spoke at the town council before, and I'm just sort of reiterating everything that I've already said. I'm with Internationalist Books and Community Center, by the way. So, in the spirit of civil discourse, I will ask nicely for the town council to fire Roger Stansel, and I will also politely ask the new mayor to rehire Clyde and Carey, and that Public Works address safety issues and its culture of racism. And I guess that's all I'm going up here to say. It'd be really great if you folks would do that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Is there a motion?
Thank you. As I listened to your State of the Town address, Mayor, I had to check on my BlackBerry the date of the Kerner Commission report. Because as I listened to you, I was thinking, well, my God, what Chapel Hill does my family live in, and do I visit every day and conduct my business, including spending my money in Chapel Hill businesses? I believe, as the Kerner Commission reported in 1968, or concluded in 1968, the nation is moving towards 2 societies, one black and one white. I argue that that's true today in Chapel Hill. So although things seem quite well to you, I'm here expressing a concern that may lead you to a different conclusion than what you came out with today in your State of the State. We indeed have, and we're moving towards 2 separate towns, one black and largely Hispanic and Latino, one white, one rich and one poor, separate
and very much unequal. Unequal in the way they're treated. I heard a lot about trees and the environment, which I certainly applaud, and as an environmentalist myself, thank you for that being a part of your focus, as well as our youth. I heard nothing about the poor. I heard nothing about the seemingly voiceless, the low-wage workers. I'm hoping that they too are on your radar and just didn't make it into your speech. It has been 3 months since the town discharged or dismissed or fired, however you want to say it, Reverend Carrie Bigelow and Mr. Clyde Clark. They were fired in the midst of the worst recession in our country's history since the 1930s, just before the holidays, and with the same family obligations that many of us share: children, mortgage, rent, insurance, transportation costs. Needless to say, as former members of the town's lowest wage workers, their living expenses and basic necessities have basically evaporated what little savings they had. Over the past several months, in addition to the CAI case, over the last several months, we have gained more evidence of the town's systematic retaliation campaign against the 2 sanitation workers, and outright lies, including a response at a request that I made from the town manager that nothing was done to deny the workers' unemployment, when indeed our lawyer received from the Employment Security Commission a pile of documents that were, we believe, sent to block or dissuade unemployment compensations for the 2 low-wage workers. I am really concerned that our current town council members have buried their heads in the sand. Maybe it's because they too buy into that favorable and glorious picture that you painted of Chapel Hill, and they are blind and they have turned a deaf ear to those concerns of these low-wage workers. I appeal before this town council that you look at the request, ask the specific questions that are included in this document, and that you take an active and vigilant role in helping to seek justice in this case. Many of you spoke on Martin Luther King Day. I don't know what's in your heart, but I certainly do know your actions are contrary and contradictory to the actions that he stood for and ultimately gave his life for.
Thank you, Ms. Laws.
North Carolina NAACP. This is a history book of the town of Chapel Hill and how it had slaves, and then the black workers that kept this town beautiful when it was run by the university and the town. I just wanted to say a few facts about what my brother Carrie Bigelow said about the CAI. The lawyer for the town called it the CIA, so we've been calling that, but it really is the CAI, Capital Associated Industries. The CAI offers classes called Staying Union Free to teach management how to eliminate mistakes that cause employees to turn to unions. Their classes include basic steps in union prevention, the actual mechanics of a union campaign, and management's role in union avoidance. This is what our taxpayers, including me and a lot of people in the room, are paying $60,000 for right now. The CAI gives classes in union awareness, in analyzing workplace war zones. Apparently they believe Public Works is a workplace war zone. The CAI president and CEO Bruce Clark is the chair-elect of the National Employer Association Group, working with the National Association of Manufacturers, whose main goal is to prevent unions across the country. CAI operates at the Employers Association of North Carolina, whose stated legislative goal is to stop the threat of collective bargaining for public employees. In other words, this organization was set up to stop the NAACP and the union movement and all the progressive people here in North Carolina that believe that this Jim Crow law of 95, 98 has to come off the books, and we're going to take it off the books this year. And I close by just saying, as a longtime resident of this town and someone who knows pretty much about how the town operates, I have never been as ashamed and appalled as I was when I began to read the contract that was signed with this union-busting group that came in here on the sly. I would like to know when and how the town hired that group and what the council was told about what the group's purposes were. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was Deborah Rosenstein and adding Andy Koch.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Rosenstein, and I'm not a student. I'm not with a particular organization here. I'm someone who used to live in North Carolina in the mid-'90s, and I was so moved by the history and the tradition of social justice in this town that I moved back after all these years to be here. And on Martin Luther King Day, I showed up, and I don't know if you remember, Mr. Mayor, but I met you and I shook hands with you, and I didn't know you were the mayor. And I was there that day because I wanted to do something meaningful on Martin Luther King Day. I did not know about the sanitation too. And what I came to find out by walking with some of them, I walked with Clyde from where we had the rally to the church. I heard their story, and what I can tell you is that I have a master's degree in labor studies, and I'm part of a community of labor educators across this country. And the story of what happened to these two men is a classic labor retaliation story. It is exactly to the book of what we've seen in so many other places. And it even goes back to the day, it's coming up in a few days from now, April 4th, when Martin Luther King was assassinated. When he was there with the sanitation workers, they were being called rude. In that moment in history, they were being told that they were the same accusations that Ms. Laws pointed out. We didn't know who the accusers were. They were saying that about those workers then. And what we know, so we know that it's a classic case, but what we also know is that you all have an opportunity. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie At the River I Stand. Has anyone, any council members seen that? If you get a chance, rent it. It's about an hour long. It's a documentary about the sanitation workers. And the city council members, just like you in Memphis, had a moment like this. And you have the chance to do the right thing. And what I can let you know is that history will watch what you do and what your decisions are. Right now, as we speak, I just came from the National Conference of Labor Educators in New Orleans, and there were hundreds gathered there, and there were photos of the Sanitation 2 on the walls. So across the nation, people are watching this case. People understand what the situation was. The one other thing I want to add is that let's say, which after having met Carrie and Clyde, I can't imagine for the life of me, but let's say that these two workers were rude or insubordinate. Let's just say it. I highly doubt it. If there was a union here, which people have pointed out, I'll be quick, you all are on record of supporting, there would be a grievance process for discipline in that kind of situation. There would not have been this theater of a fake hearing with witnesses calling in. There would have actually been a process, and there would have been fairness. And that's why you have all said that you support collective bargaining. If you support collective bargaining, then you can't fire workers for trying to get there and get that system which is going to ensure fairness for management and labor into the future here. So I, too, thank you, Mr. Ward, for your courage. And I really tell you all, this is your opportunity to be on the right side of history, and we're all watching. Thanks.
Thank you.